All right, so we've got our cakes baked, we've got our tier boards cut, and we have some delicious Swiss buttercream ready to go. So now we're going to go ahead and fill our cake tier. First thing I'm going to do is take some wet paper towel and put it in the middle of my turntable. This is a standard turntable. There's actually a little nozzle at the bottom here where you can tighten it so it's hard to move, or loosen it so it's easy. Important to remember, in case you pick it up, these do pop out and a 15-pound weight is going to come crashing down on your foot. So I have a little loose so I can spin it around. My wet paper towel. I have my tier board that I'm going to center here. A lot of birthday cakes, typically you'll just take 2 layers of cake, put them on top of each other with a layer in between. Wedding cakes tend to have 3 layers in between. They're a little bit fancier. The pieces are smaller, so people want to get more of the frosting, more of the good stuff. What I have here is a cake leveler. It's kind of a piano wire that I'm going to slide through the cake. It works great on cakes that are 12 inches or smaller. Anything bigger than that, you want to use a large serrated blade. So what I'm going to do is just drag this through, keeping it nice and flat on the tabletop. And I'll do it over here as well. And this is when you call out to your family that there's cake scraps, and people will come to gobble them up. There we go. So I've got 2 different offset spatulas here, and they're offset because they've got this nice little bend in the blade there. I want to chalk up fairly high on it so that my index finger is right on the bend there, and that's going to give me the most control. And you can play around with these. This one has a lot of tension. It's pretty hard to move around, whereas this longer one is really, really wobbly. So it's a matter of personal preference, what you like best. I like to do this on larger cakes and have something a little firmer for smaller cakes or on the side. So you'll see me using them both. The first thing I'm going to do is take a little bit of chocolate Swiss buttercream, smear that on the bottom of the board, and as that sets up, it's going to keep the cake from sliding off, which is something we want to avoid at all costs. I'll start with the bottom. That gets centered right on the cake tier, constantly cleaning up for crumbs. I have a spatula here, and I'm going to fill it with a chocolate Swiss buttercream. And more is more. You can always take it off. If you keep putting it back on, you're going to find that it takes longer and longer to make. So start with a lot, nice big healthy serving. And the movement I'm making here is kind of like your royal wave. Go back and forth with your wrist motion so your hand is nice and firm. That way I'm not picking up any crumbs and bringing them back into the frosting. So first I kind of spread it around, and now is when you start to turn it. And when you turn it, that wet paper towel is going to hold it in place, and you're going to get a nice, smooth, even. It's all about being even. You don't want your cake to be tilted. If the bottom tier is tilted, the top tier is going to be really tilted. All right? So we've got a nice straight, you can see where it's picking up excess, so we get it nice and flat. The top goes on here, and a lot of cakes you'll notice drop off to the side a little bit. That's not something to panic about. You're going to fill that in with frosting. I've never had anybody complain about too much frosting on one side. And the same motion. The turntable's your friend. Let that do a lot of the work for you. There we go. Okay. And wedding cakes are typically 4 layers of cake. So I've got another layer right here. Again, I'm just sliding it through. And more cake scraps. So now I'm going to go on the top, use the top portion of the cake. That way I'm reserving this bottom side, which is perfectly squared off, and that's going to be the top of my cake. It's going to make it really nice and sharp. All right, so I'm going to take the bottom of my last tier, brush off any loose crumbs, and that goes on upside down. And you want to look over the top, make sure it's not too far off to the side, otherwise it's going to come out as you go around the side. So what I like to do is take a bench scraper. I love these when they don't have a long handle so that they're totally flat. put that on my board, just like this, and see if I've got any cake that is pushed over to the side a little bit. And you can see right here I've got my cake pushed a little bit over, so I'm just going to manhandle it. Push it off to the side, clean off my fingers, and it's all nice and straight. And now it's time to do the sides of the cake. And we want to build them up so that they are perfectly vertical. And I'm going to do that with the offset spatula. And I've got some vanilla buttercream here. Move it close. The further away it is, the more you're going to drop on the countertop. There we go. And I'm going to do that same waving motion back and forth. And that's going to keep crumbs from joining the outside of my buttercream. You can do this fairly quickly. It's actually a lot faster the more buttercream you use. There we go. You can see I've kept it pretty crumb-free. Now I'm going to go back and fill in any gaps. And it looks a little crazy and messy right now, and that's totally fine. It's nice and built up. So before I do the top of the cake, I want to smooth out my sides. And that's because I like to have my hand on the top here, and if it's got buttercream in there, I'm just going to make a giant handprint. So I'll move this off to the side a little bit. Slide this in perfectly straight up and down until I feel that tier board we cut. And since we have that little lip around the tier board, as we drag our bench scraper around, it's just going to take off the excess and no more. And if you see your cake through it, don't fret. It's totally fine. We're going to cover it. This is just the crumb coat. We're going to cover it with either more buttercream in a pattern, or we're going to cover it with fondant. There we go. So you can see how much excess was on the sides there. Now it's going to get a little easier, but you want to make sure that this is perfectly vertical. A lot of people want to tilt it one side or the other, and when you do that, you end up with a cake that's bowed out a little bit. So I'll take some of that excess, plop it on top, and use the same method as before. You always want to chill your buttercream before fondanting it. It is fairly soft, and if I were to fondant it right now, I would get a very marshmallowy, curvy looking corner. I want it to be as straight as possible, so I'm going to chill it. And now I'm just taking off my excess, and don't be afraid to get down on eye level with your cake and spin it around. Make sure those sides are perfectly straight up and down, and your top is nice and flat. I'll run over again one more time. And I'm just going to drag that little lip straight in. Filling in any little gaps. Every little nick will show up underneath the fondant. It's not a forgiving medium. All right, so we've got our cake all nice and smooth on the edges. Our top looks good and straight. So I'm just going to pop this in the refrigerator, and that is how you frost a cake.